Hey, Nerd, Dynasty Nerds back again as we're getting ready to wrap up our 2023 rookie running back breakdowns. This is where we're going to get into the meat and potatoes of the class and really look at the depth of what this class has to offer.
You say meat and potato, I say Chardonnay.
Ooh, Chardonnay. Not as good as a Mr. Tink Bigsby, though.
Ooh.
And a couple of nerd nuggets to go on top. And I got a good, interesting story about how I get lost at sea.
Did you say nerd tuggets?
Nerd tuggets? Keeping it.
Ready, set, hut, hut. Welcome to the Dynasty Nerds Fantasy Football Podcast, where we discuss Dynasty strategy, rankings, and all things NFL. So get ready to geek out on fantasy football with your host, Rich Dotson.
And welcome to the Dynasty Nerds Fantasy Football Podcast. I'm your host, Rich Dotson, here with my fellow nerds, Matt O'Hara.
Hey.
And Garrett Price.
How's it going?
It's going well. We're here to wrap up the 2023 rookie running back class. We're going to cover the next two shows, this and the Nerd Herd show, and give your opinion on these running backs. And it's an interesting class. And I feel like there's way more to talk about these two shows than the last two shows. And as a whole, I just tweeted out my overall running back tiers for the class. And I do feel this class got a lot of talk. This running back class is super deep. And I do feel like it's deep.
It's deep.
I came away a little bit less excited about these players, but there's a lot of talent there. I feel like this class will be defined a little bit more. I feel like it'll be sharpened. That knife is going to be a little bit sharpened by the NFL draft because a lot of my tiers are close. Definitely my third tier, those guys have really close. And a lot of those guys are actually on the show that we're going to talk about today. Yeah,
and we talked about it pre-show, but I think it was a little bit of a product of all the COVID, people staying in school a little bit longer, and now it's kind of come to a head. Those guys are getting forced out. Plus, there's the normal influx of regular old juniors that are declaring early and that kind of stuff. So that's where the depth I think is coming from. And like you mentioned, it's the NFL draft and opportunity might be the separator on some of these guys that are really close.
Yeah, I'm excited because it's a year where you can almost throw outside of the top one or two. You can almost throw consensus out the window. Yep. There really is no consensus. It's, what have you seen, or what are your, numbers telling you, or, all of these different things, guys that heavily lean on production versus traits. There's a lot of different variables to weigh in this class. And that's where it gets fun for me. That's where I really like digging into the nitty gritty on these players.
Yeah, there should be a lot of disagreeing when it comes to this draft class. I know I put the tweet out there, and there's a couple people I respect a ton in the business already wrote at me hey, Chase Brown, way too low. And I'm like, well, I already dug that hole. People are like,
that is one we agree on, though.
Kendre Miller, I'm like, we're going to find out, and let's sharpen the knife first. Yep. So we're going to get in this show. I just got back from the Dominican. A couple quick stories about Dominican on my island. I probably look really tan to you guys right now.
Island.
His rich island.
Wow.
Yeah, well, I bought it, so now it's mine. Me and Shakira are neighbors. Saw our house. Three quick stories. One, I had to be rescued at sea.
Did you for real?
Yeah, we went paddleboarding on the ocean, and my youngest, and they said you can't go out there when it's windy, is what they said. And I'm like, okay, and it wasn't really windy.
Paddleboarding on the open ocean is hard.
It was the open ocean.
Yeah.
Caribbean Sea.
Yep.
The most beautiful sea I've ever seen in my entire life, mind you. And my youngest son, all of a sudden got real windy, and he just kept going, dude, you need to come back this way. And he's like, I can't. I'm like, I'm almost yelling at him, you're doing it wrong, In hindsight, I felt bad because I've never seen my son as scared as he was when we got out there.
Which son, by the way?
Camden.
Okay.
So he's 10, and my oldest son is 13. You would never know because he's built like a brick house. Yeah. I'll probably play in the NFL one day. He literally beat me in arm wrestling for the first time in starter life. We're there. I had a couple of Mai Tais. So I told my youngest son, my wife went to go get him, and he kept going farther and farther. We were already far out, but literally the wind started going, and you'd go 100 feet in 2 seconds. I told my youngest son, because we're out there too, I'm like, I got to go get your brother. He's like, Dad, don't leave me. I'm like, go back to shore. I got to get your brother. And I'm going away. He's like, Dad, don't leave me. I'm like, I have to get your brother. And I go out there. My son's freaking out, right?
Sure.
He's freaking out. He's crying. He's like, Dad, I can't get back. And I take the paddle board and I attach it to my foot. I told my wife, I'm like, just go. I got this. And I'm paddling as hard as I can. And I'm literally not moving.
Yep.
And as soon as I stop paddling, we go back 100 feet. And he's freaking out, crying, Dad, please. I'm like, and I wasn't worried. I literally wasn't worried at all. I was at no point was I scared. I'm like, bud, we're gonna
Was
be
this
fine.
part of like a little excursion or something like that?
No,
you guys were just out on your own.
My wife was pissed that the resort had no idea that they couldn't see us. She was not happy with them. And I'm like, bud, we're gonna be okay. Like somebody's gonna come get us eventually. Like, don't worry about it. Like we could see a boat. There was nobody on it. But I was like, we're gonna be okay.
Right. You're not gonna be marooned on a desert island.
He didn't see it that way.
Deserted island.
And then finally, these two people on a motorboat start coming our way, and I'm like waving them. And they come over and like, you have a young. They couldn't speak English very well. I'm like, you have a younger son. He said you need help. I'm like, yeah. My youngest son was so happy to see him. We get on the boat. It took us 5 minutes to get back from the motorboat. Wow.
Yeah,
but like,
out there.
and then we get back, and the resort guy's like, oh yeah, that's that happens sometimes. And I'm like, my wife's like, how did you not know we were gone? Like, how did you not know? And they're like, oh, it just happens every day. And like we were
you just lose a
hundreds and hundreds of feet out. Like it was insane. So that was one thing that happened.
All right, lay it on me.
Second
Number
thing
two.
is I karate chopped my wife in the head.
Oh,
By accident, but
by purpose.
Okay,
That's what he was about to say. He was about to say by
not
purpose.
karate chop, karate punch. But like I have no idea what I was doing. We were just walking down the hall, like to go into dinner. You know when people like do the karate move where they do the backhand like this? If you're watching on YouTube, like hiya! Out of nowhere, I just stopped. I was like, hiya! In the middle of the hall. No idea she was behind me. Boom! Right in the head.
Is it a successful tactic?
Works
pretty well.
She was like, "What the?"
I would imagine she was pissed. I know your wife. That couldn't have gone.
Yeah,
it could not have gone
we
over
were,
well.
we were laughing about it, but she's like, that really hurt. I'm like, I had no idea you were there. She's like, why'd you do that? I was like, I have no idea why I did that. I was like, you know me. You've been married to me forever.
The moment struck
like,
me.
yeah.
I was a ninja for a second. Why wouldn't I do that?
Literally, that was it. That was my excuse.
To be fair, I did something similar, only it was to myself, unfortunately. I was all of a sudden in the middle, this was like high school, and I was in the middle of a basketball game all of a sudden, and I went up to shoot a jumper, and I stabbed myself in my eye with my thumb, scratched my cornea, and I had to it was like at this like church camp. And I was like the cool kid that had to wear goggles and stuff the rest of the week if I did like anything. So yeah, that was great.
I caught her just like with the tip of my knuckle too. Like I barely caught it, but it left like a little red mark. We made like drinking friends while there too. And I told that we saw them as soon as we got out to dinner. I was like, you're not going to believe what I just did. I was like, at first I was like, tell me if you can see a mark on my wife's head. And they're like, I can see a little mark. She's like, I told you. I'm like, here's what I did.
Here's what I did.
You know what I mean? And then the third thing was I found out my wife is a psychopath.
Oh, wow.
So I found out
Is that why you hit her?
After you hit her, you found out she was a psychopath. That makes sense. It all makes sense.
Everybody who's listening to this
nearly
podcast,
died.
I'm about to blow your minds. Unless you're a psychopath too. I read a stat that 30 to 50% of people don't have internal dialogue. I thought it was fake. I was like, that can't be a real stat. But it is a real stat. And right before we go on vacation, we're at a family dinner with all our family. And I was telling them this, and the whole family's like, oh, that's so weird. Don't have internal dialogue. I'm like, I talk to myself. If I'm not talking out loud, I'm talking inside. Mm-hmm. Everybody's like, that's really weird. We get to my wife. My wife's like, I don't have internal dialogue. I'm like, what? She's like, I don't have internal dialogue. You mean you talk to yourself? I'm like, yeah, all the time. And everybody else is like, yeah, me too, all the time. She's like, I don't do that. I'm like,
how do you think through things?
Yeah. I'm like, literally. Oh, I had so many questions on vacation.
I'm like, so many questions.
I'm like,
I already do.
You are a psychopath. Like, how do you even live? And she's like, I see and I do.
She lives like a shark. You know what I mean? Like seafood, eat food.
After so we're sitting there at dinner though, and after I cry chopped her, she's staring at me. She's like, I'm having internal dialogue right now.
You fixed her.
Yeah, there.
But for the most part, she said she does not have internal dialogue. So there's 30% of people listening to this podcast right now. They're like, yeah, I don't have internal dialogue.
I do.
Yeah, I for sure do.
Yeah. Literally every second. If I'm not, sometimes I have internal dialogue. Why I'm actually talking. It's why I talk the way I do because my brain.
See, I'll say this. I don't have it all the time, but I definitely talk to myself in my head. But it's not all the time.
I sometimes drive with the radio off just so I can think and talk to myself. Maybe I'm the psychopath. Anyways.
Anywho.
Those are my 3 stories.
All right.
Now we got to get to the show. Sorry if that bored you, but those are my 3 stories. Before we get into our story, our running backs, I got to tell you about our friends at UnderDog. It's such a fun time of the year. It's always fun, but right now is a really good time because the rookies are on UnderDog, and that's a best ball draft app, right? And you're like, what's best ball? It's literally an opportunity to do what we all love to do all the time, and that's draft teams. It's why we'd like to join more startups because of the drafting ability. It's why we redraft just to do the drafts. This gives you opportunity to draft a team and then set it aside and not worry about it again and see how it plays out at the end of the year. That's what best ball fantasy football is. And that's what underdog fantasy is. It gives you an opportunity to go in, compete versus one person, heads up, 2 people, 6 people, 12 people, as many people as you want to play against for as much money as you want to play against. And you draft your team and you forget it until the end of the year. I usually draft about, honestly, like 35 to 50 teams just because I join a draft. When that one's over, I join another one. I enjoy
I've become
the
the same way. I've become the same way ever since downloading the app.
Yeah?
I've done like eight leagues.
It's addicting.
It
is so much fun, and you can join them for as little as $3. You know what I mean? So it doesn't cost you a lot, and the dopamine hit is the draft, like the pick, like the upside, and us dynasty players, I feel always have a slight edge when these rookies are in there because you know them better than others, and I usually do well because I'll draft a lot of those rookie running backs. So. Right now, if you go to UnderDog, you download the app, you too can get on this madness. And if you use the promo code NERDS, they're going to match your deposit up to $100, 100%. So if you put in $100, you're going to have $200 in your account. If you're going to put in $50, you have $100 in your account. It's awesome. But on top of that, the best deal possible. I mentioned we're going to talk about these running backs, this show, and the Nerd Herd show. If you want to get the Nerd Herd show for a year, you can get it for as little as $10. Not only do you get the extra Nerd Herd show, but you get access to the film room where we watch all the tape where we break down these rookies. You get access to the Nerd Score when it comes out right around the NFL draft. And then more importantly, you get access to the Dynasty GM, the greatest all-encompassing tool on the market. And right now, all that by going to UnderDog, download the app. It's for new users only. So if you already used the app and you put money into it, it does not count. But if you never used the app, download it, put in the promo code NERDS. You're going to match your deposit. We're going to send you a promo code for a free year subscription to dynastynerds.com, the Nerd Herd. You're going to get every tool that we have to offer for a full year. Not a week, not a month, a full year. Take advantage of this film room for this year's class and next year's class and get all these extra podcasts. And hopefully we can prove to you within that year that it's worth sticking around for. And it's that good. And we have a lot of updates coming here with the next month as well. So check it out on dynastynerds.com, UnderDog. Use that promo code NERDS. You got to. And if you're an existing Nerd Herd member already, we're going to send you a free Dynasty Nerds t-shirt. The most comfortable shirt in the world. Matt's wearing one.
I sure am.
So
Some
check it
people
out.
think it's too small, but that's okay.
That's okay. I think it looks good on you.
I'm an in-between size type of guy.
You're a medium?
Yeah. Well, when you got chesticles like that, what are you going to do?
Large?
It's a
Marge?
What would be between a large and an extra large? How would you say that? That's where I'm at. Exactly. Extra medium? Extra medium?
Extra medium.
Extra medium. I'm an extra medium.
Yeah, you go over here. So let's go. Finally, how many minutes are we at?
About 10.
Let's get into these 2023 rookie running backs.
More like 12. All right, so the first one up is Zach Charbonnet, running back, UCLA, 6 foot, 214 pounds, 9 7/8 inch hands. Ran the 40 in 4.53 seconds, had a 122-inch broad jump, 18 reps on the bench, and 37-inch vertical. Last year, he had 195 attempts, 1,359 rushing yards, 14 touchdowns, 37 receptions, 321 yards, and no additional touchdowns in 10 games.
So Zach Charbonnet originally went to Michigan, had a solid freshman campaign, and then kind of to a lot of people's surprise, ended up transferring all the way to the West Coast, ended up going to UCLA for his final 3 years, joined up with good old buddy Chip Kelly. And there were many that thought, including myself, that he was going to declare last year. He was going to declare as a junior. He's got the size. He's got decent-ish speed. He has a lot of the things pedigree-wise that you would have assumed, like, oh, this is a prototypical, comes out of his third year, probably be a day 2 pick, more like third round, but probably a day 2 pick. He decides to go back to school. And overall, I don't think it was a poor decision on his part to do that, because I do think he did make some leaps in his game this year. Not drastic leaps, but I do think he advanced in his game this year. The most difficult part, though, with studying Zach Charbonnet that I had a tricky time with is his offensive line is fantastic, which we normally are saying the opposite about these players. It's right. And there will be players we talk about how bad their offensive line is, but he has a great offensive line. So many of his big plays that you see are the product of fantastic blocking. So that's what makes him a little bit more of a difficult evaluation, is how much of that is him, how much of that is his offensive line. And that was one of the things that I had a harder time breaking down. Currently for me in this class, he's currently running back 5. I gave him a 73.93. So just for a reference point, like Etienne was a 74 for me when I graded him. So he's just a hair under Travvis Etienne. So obviously very good prospect, right. Overall, very solid grade, pretty solid reading the holes, very patient runner, but he's not overly elusive, not great game speed, like long speed. It's doable, but that's nothing you're going to talk about as a really positive trait. I think he has decent quickness for a bigger guy. And I know he came in a little bit later at the combine. From everything that I had heard, he was playing at closer to 220, 225 during the season. I think he slimmed down to run a better 40 time. I'm wondering what that 40 time would have been if he would have been 10 pounds heavier. It would have been in the upper 4.5s as opposed to lower 4.5s. So I'm curious to see what that is. One of the better contact balance players in the class overall. And there's some good things there as far as pass catching that you wouldn't have expected out of a bigger, more physical back. So he is one of these backs that does truly profile as a 3-down guy. I'm really struggling to see, is he a solid back or is he a really good back? And I do, like, if I'm being completely honest, I truly don't know. I'm really having a hard time pegging him because for a while I had his score has fluctuated for me a bunch. When I watch games, I'm like, oh, this is actually better than I thought. This is actually worse than I thought. And it's gone up and down. His score was as high as a 75 for me at one point. It was as low as a 71 for me at one point. It has fluctuated a ton because I keep picking out little nuances of things that are a little bit better and things that are a little bit worse in his game. So he's been all over the map. I think he's a good player. I don't think he could end up getting round 2 draft capital in the NFL draft. I think he's more fit for the 3rd round, though, for me personally.
I think 2nd round would be a stretch from what I've seen personally. I don't see the one thing that any one of his attributes, none of his attributes wow me.
Sure.
And that's kind of where I'm at with this guy. And for me, if you're going to get drafted that high, especially nowadays, I think you have to have 1 or 2 things that pop. Mm-hmm. So I do think he's a guy that's going to end up, I think, slipping a little bit. Perhaps that's why he stayed in school. Maybe he knew he had some things to work on and was hoping to work on them. I mean, like you said, catching passes this year, in only 10 games, 37 receptions compared to last year. 12 games, he had 24. Mm-hmm. So he basically went, from 2 catches a game to nearly 4 catches a game. So that he did improve in that area, and I think that's an important thing for a guy like this, because if you're not going to pop and you're not going to be very, very explosive or anything like that at that size, you better do something else. You better be good in pass blocking. You better be able to catch the ball. Mm-hmm. And I think, going back to school for this 4th year helped in those respects.
I agree.
Yeah, I agree with a lot what you guys are saying. He reminds me of James Conner a lot.
It's a good comp.
That's who he kind of reminds me of, which is, again, it's not a fancy player, right? But he's a running guy. He's going to give you running back 1 numbers potentially in the right situation, or be a running back 2. And Zach Charbonnet for me seems like a really safe player in this class. I like you having him at number 5, Garrett, because I have him right. So I have him in my 3rd tier. So I have a Bijan Robinson, Jahmyr Gibbs, each in their own tier. Mm-hmm. And then not far behind Gibbs is I have Devin Achane, Tajay Spears, and Zach Charbonnet. Okay. That's my next tier. I would take Devin Achane first as it stood today.
Okay.
And then Spears and Charbonnet are really close because what does he have? He's got really good size, really good size that pops out. He has really good numbers this year, averaging almost 7 yards per carry, like Matt said, in 10 games. Those are solid numbers, the 37 receptions. Really good patience and vision, like Garrett said. I really like the way he works in tight quarters for a guy of his size as well. Real productive early down. Almost 40% of his carries went for first downs or touchdowns last year. Those are really good productive numbers. Yeah. It's going to really entice NFL teams. And another reason I have him in that tier is because I could, like you said with his draft capital, I could see him going there, and I feel like his opportunity is going to be really good coming into this class. Liked him in the passing game this year. I thought he ran some pretty good routes as well. Sometimes I get a little bit. I was like, will he be a little bit more limited in the NFL? I don't know what he does there for when I'm watching him. Love the contact balance. He's a real true north-south runner. Always finishes his run strong as well. Little tight in the hips, not a lot of wiggle out there.
Not a lot of lateral stuff.
Yeah.
Where do you guys land on the power on this guy? I feel like for a guy that was 225-ish, 220, 225, I wanted to see a little bit more of the physicality.
I felt like it was adequate.
It was interesting because he didn't punish people like I wanted him to.
Right.
But you see really good power in short yardage, goal line. So he's got the lower half that he will move the pile. He will move people. So I think he has good power, but some of these guys that are, maybe not even quite as big as him, well, you'll see them launch themselves at people and just run through people. He doesn't do that quite as much as I want.
You know what? Know why? I think I have the answer for that. Why he doesn't run with as much power? You mentioned it. When he wants to, on short yardage, he runs with good power. But for the most part, he doesn't. I think it's because he runs a little too upright.
He is an upright
runner. So he loses
he can get caught off guard. You know what I mean? When he's not expecting to have to lower the shoulder, he's up too high, he gets hit, and sometimes he's not, falling forward, so to speak. He's maybe falling sideways.
So when we talk about it on the podcast and you hear us say it, because I'll mention other runners, like, hey, they're upright runners. I guess to give that a little bit of clarification, when you're an upright runner like that, that's what happens. You lose the power. Like, it's why we want a running back to run behind their pads, essentially. They want to get down low because that's where the power comes from, because then you can get that launch and you get the shoulder into the player as well. So
the old adage is the low man wins.
Low man wins.
Yeah.
Yep.
So I think he loses that power of his running style. Now, sometimes it's hard to coach out of a player because it's just how they run. Adrian Peterson was an upright runner.
Sure. But he was a freak also.
So was like Matt Forte was an upright runner.
Yep.
So Zach Charbonnet to me seems like a really solid player. My final note on him, really for dynasty fantasy purposes, was probably a really good sell early, like that typical hashtag 2 to 3 year window. James Conner, I again felt that same mold, but he kind of like broke that mold a little bit, where he had a really good year in Pittsburgh, then a couple down years, and went to Arizona and played well again. Was a running back 1. So I feel like Zach Charbonnet is a really good draft pick because I feel like his return will be substantial. Like he'll look good enough early where if you want to get out, you won't lose out on the pick. You'll get a year or two out of him and then be able to sell him for a solid return.
And that makes sense to me. I had it in here in my final notes as well. Like he's one of these guys that's going to need to have like a 70% share to be fantasy relevant, to be like big time fantasy relevant. So he's never going to be a guy that if he's splitting time 50-50, you're going to love it. You know what I mean? He might be bordering running back 2, running back 3 in that kind of scenario. If he's getting 70% of the carries and he's like the team's lead guy, you can expect some pretty.
He needs a Tyler
stuff.
Algier situation.
Yeah, he does.
That's
he's young. I mean, he's 22. Like he's played a lot, but he's young. He's 22 years old, so he's not coming out where he's like this older running back. He'll be 22 in this season. Again, I have Zach Charbonnet in that third tier. I think he's a very solid prospect. I feel he's safe. He's not, to me, he's not as exciting as Devon Achane or Tajay Spears. But I feel like his floor is a lot safer than those two.
He is. Well. He's a very safe guy. I would be shocked if he falls to day 3. Like, I don't think he's a round 4 guy. It's possible, sure. But
he's a third round pick.
He really seems like a prototypical third round pick.
The NFL knows all the same things we know. You know what I mean? Right. There are a lot of available players.
All right.
Fortunately for him, there's not a lot of big players. Like he's one of these outliers. So if somebody's looking for a 220-pound back, there's only a couple places to go
a few of them
in this draft. So that might push him up the board a little bit. But if they're not interested in that, or they've gotten it somewhere else in free agency or something like that, he might be a guy that slips a little bit. Yeah, so it is one of those things.
Very interested where he goes.
It could go either way. Yep.
Very interested. But I mean, I came away overall. I know, Matt, when you said you watched his tape, like he was boring to you, and I totally get that. And that's why I said, like, well, that's why he reminds me of James Conner. Like, there's like, but he gets it done. Like he's kind of running back, like you mentioned, in the right situation. He's gonna get it done. So Zach Charbonnet, running back UCLA, very solid. Had a couple games missed last year, but still very productive. And productive last year as well. So I like to see. It's always good to see a running back that comes out and he produces back-to-back years, and not just has that one big-time year. So Zach Charbonnet, UCLA, I give him a thumbs up.
Thumbs up.
Yep. Solid. Like this.
I was going to say it's not all the way, right? It's like cocked a little bit.
A little bit.
No, it's not Fonzie, but it's
like, hey.
Yeah.
All right, moving on. Tank Bigsby is our next guy. Running back, Auburn, 6 foot, 210 pounds, 9.5-inch hands, 4.56 in the 40, 119-inch broad jump, 21 reps on the bench, and 32.5 vert. Last year in 12 games, he had 179 rushing attempts, 970 yards, 10 touchdowns, 30 receptions, 180 yards, and no additional touchdowns. He's 21 years old.
Yeah, I'll be 22 when the season starts.
In August.
So Tank Bigsby, it's a real good name for him, like a big, strong Tank Bigsby guy. And we just talked about this literally a second ago with Zach Charbonnet, where he's like, oh, some teams have a really good offensive line. Complete opposite with Tank Bigsby.
Complete opposite.
I thought his offensive line was honestly one of the worst offensive line of all these running backs we talk.
Yep.
He was hit behind the line of scrimmage a ton. Like a ton. Like I couldn't this poor guy. It's like, so I was like, I have to give him some kudo points for that. Right. So and I did. I came away with watching Tank Bigsby because I put him in that fourth tier, and I'm like, I could see him moving up.
He's in my third tier.
So here's the thing. I like his tape overall. You know, he's got really good size. He runs really well inside. Makes some really, and I came away really impressed. Like he makes some really good cuts for his size.
Very good cuts.
His start and stop ability was pretty impressive for a guy being 6 foot, 210 pounds. See, I'm talking myself already putting him in upper tier.
Yeah, moving on up.
He runs really strong. I mean, this is a guy who averaged 5.4 yards per carry in the SEC with the worst offensive line I saw of all these players. So that says a lot. And he's really secure with the football. Only has one career fumble. He's okay in the passing game, a little bit limited there. Had his best year this past year in the passing game with those 30 receptions. That was his best year overall. He has really good contact balance as well.
Very good.
So real solid overall thick running back that can get the job done. Like NFL teams are really going to like what they see there.
Yep.
I felt like he was inconsistent. Like that was part of my notes, but then I kept going back to like, was he inconsistent though because of the offensive line? Like, is that a part of it? I mean, he did have his best year in the passing game this year. I don't know if that's overall a natural fit for him. Like, I don't know if an NFL team is going to use him that way. I think he can do it, but I don't know if an NFL team is necessarily going to use him in that mold.
It kind of reminds me of like Jonathan Taylor, how like he ended up catching a bunch of passes. It was like, that's not naturally his gifting, but like he's good enough that if they asked him to do it, he could.
Yeah, and that makes sense as well.
30 receptions, 180 yards. You know what I mean? Like it wasn't something
6-point average. Yeah, nothing crazy.
That's nothing crazy.
He's an upright runner as well, so he does lose a little bit power there, which kind of again that hurts a little bit there. His pass protection, I didn't come away overly like in love with, and he's also one of those one speed runners, right? Like he goes and then he's going, so you can see him get caught from behind a lot because he's just that, and that's not always a bad thing. It's just that's the kind of runner he is. Overall, I came in with Tank Bigsby as like a very solid prospect. I probably have him in that fourth tier now because I want to see where he goes. Because he could be somebody that ends up in a really good situation, or he could be Zach Moss, right? Like he could easily be Zach Moss to me.
Yep.
And you know, Zach Moss though goes to the Bills, and people got really excited about it. Like that's what he could be, right? But he could be bored.
I really like Tank. In a year where there were guys that I really liked, and we'll talk about it more in the next show, that I always really liked as like Devy guys, and I was really excited about. And then I watched their tape and I was like, oh no, I don't like this guy at all. Actually, you know, this was one of the ones where he held true for me. Watching his tape, the things I liked about him early on, the things I liked about when I watched him live or highlights or things like that, all still very much still held true. You're absolutely right. His offensive line was terrible. His biggest weakness, it's funny because it's his biggest weakness, but it also doesn't bother me that much. He does not have patience. That is something that I do think he needs to develop more, is being a little bit more patient. But that being said, I love his running style because he finds a hole and gets there right now.
Yep.
Like it's this downhill running style that I very much so like. And he's almost like one of those like luge skiers, or you know, like when he's out there, like he's got a nice dead leg, but he's not trying to string multiple moves together.
He doesn't.
It's one move and go. One move and go.
I put that in my notes as well. Like I don't know that he's laterally going to be able to string together things to make guys miss in the hole, but he can string a play out, and as soon as he sees that hole, boom, go. You know what I mean? He puts his foot in the ground. He's laterally explosive within like one move. I don't know that he could do that back and forth,
right?
And because I think he's just too big a little bit.
He's too big, but he moves. He does it
smooth,
really well and smoother side. Like he can literally stop and then go for a guy for his size, it's pretty.
There was an exact play like that behind the line of scrimmage against Alabama where I walked away like, man, that was a great play because, I mean, we're talking about a lot of first-round defensive talent on the Alabama team, and there were 3 guys in the backfield, and the design play was not there. He stopped on a dime and then beat everybody to the outside, which, unlike a lot of guys here, he's not a guy that's constantly trying to bounce it to the outside. Like, he's going to take the lane and he's going to go. He had enough vision and in that moment enough patience. You know, a lot of times he doesn't, but in that moment enough patience just to be able to diagnose the play, be able to be athletic enough to stop and redirect. And that's tough to do with that type of defense and then still beat guys to the outside. Shows me there's enough speed there. He's not an elite speed guy. No one will mistake him for that.
4.56.
But there's enough speed there, and especially the initial acceleration.
Right.
I think he accelerates really, really well. So,
and he had a good 10-yard split, which speaks to that.
Makes perfect sense. And for a guy that weighed a little bit less than I would have thought, man, he loves to deliver contact. He's the opposite of Charbonnet in that sense, whereas I don't think he's as powerful naturally as Charbonnet is. I think Charbonnet's lower half is stronger than Bigsby, but Bigsby is going to make you feel it every opportunity he can.
And I love that.
Yep.
That is not boring tape for me to watch.
Yeah.
So I do appreciate that. And I had a lot of the same notes. I wrote in here, verbatim almost a lot of these things, but plays faster than his time speed. You know what I mean? Like I did see that on tape where he was beating guys to the outside. He might not have that top gear, and that's probably where this 4, 5, 6 comes from. But I think the burst is there. He can get past people with speed, and he can laterally put it together. One move up the field. He gets upfield quickly. In the NFL, these are things that you need. This guy would fit great in his own scheme. You know what I mean?
Yes.
Like this is like a
one cut and go.
Glove in hand type of fit for Tank Bigsby and that kind of system. So this is going to depend on where he goes, because I don't know that he is a guy that would fit in every system that well. But if he lands in a Miami, if he lands in a San Francisco type of place, or any of those offshoots that run that same kind of zone scheme, I think he could be very successful. And that's where I see him. He's a guy that's going to, at least for me, it's going to depend on landing spot a lot as far as how high his ceiling is. But I think he's a good running back regardless, and I think he can be a good player. But he can be a fantasy difference maker, I think, in one of those zones.
And I think, Matt, you can say that about a lot of these running backs right here. And I think that's what's exciting about this class. And we got a lot of the juice flowing because a lot of these guys have a lot of exciting attributes.
Right.
But again, there's only so many jobs to go to, right? Like. And we even see now some of these teams are holding off on some of these running backs. Like like Zeke's still out there, and these guys will find homes. Kareem Hunt's still out there. So, and some of these guys even sign like their jobs aren't 100% secure. That when they go to certain places, even though we like to land the spot now, that's going to change after NFL draft, and it's why we re-rank these guys after the NFL draft. And like this year, we're going to do a show, and we always try to do the show like immediately after the NFL draft is over. Like so that's Sunday. We'll all be together, and we're going to record the podcast that Sunday. So the podcast should be out by that Sunday night for your running back class. We're going to rank these guys in order of how we like them in Superflex and PPR. So we give you a little bit longer shows. We kind of break them down a bit Sunday. And I think this class is full of guys like Tank Bigsby, right? Like if put in the right situation, put in the right scheme with the right opportunity, they're going to be dynasty fantasy football, assets. So there's so many of them. It's impossible to say who's going to be the guy you really want, because there's honestly 8 of these guys that you're like, okay, they could be fantasy football relevant. Yeah. But will they get the opportunity? Because some of these guys, unfortunately, are going to end up on teams that, we just don't love the situation.
Yeah, for me, he currently ends up just a notch above Zach Charbonnet. So he ended up as my running back 4. Oh, wow. With a 74.3. So big fan of Tank Bigsby. One of only 4 running backs in this class to get above a 74. So solid player.
So you have the highest.
I think Tank will be above Charbonnet for me also. Okay. I haven't set that in stone yet, but watching him, he just has more juice. I like his running style. I think it translates a little bit better to fantasy production as well, without a huge volume.
Makes me feel like I need to dig back in then, because I'm the lowest. And anytime that you two guys like a player equally, and I don't like, and I like him. So like, I feel
Sure.
like I'm missing
Yeah,
something
you're not-
where
you're
I have
not
him in a
far
different
off.
tier. So I feel like I need to dive back in a little bit deeper,
And to
which
be
I'll have to do.
to be fair, like he is not that far away from Charbonnet, like less than a half point away from Charbonnet and A-Chain for me.
And I
so
might
they're
just-
like right there.
I might have Charbonnet a little bit lower also.
Sure,
You know what I mean?
sure.
So that might be the reasoning as well. So don't go crazy, Rich. But I mean, it just might be a whole
I
whirlwind.
probably didn't give him that. I think I missed him in that tier. I didn't put him in the same tier with Kenny McIntosh, DeWayne McBride, Zach Evans, and Roshan Johnson. So that's where I messed up. So it's probably this. I literally just went by the wayside here. So I'll have to dig back in and bump him up.
That's basically my next tier. Yeah, I just have them a tier higher. So, but I have a lot of those same players in the tier below.
Okay.
So,
All right. So moving on to our next prospect, Eric Gray, Oklahoma running back, 5'9", 207 pounds. 9 3/4 inch hands. There's no 40 time or anything like that. He had a 118-inch broad jump, 37.5-inch vert. He is 23 right now. He'll be 24 when the season comes around in November anyway. Last year at Oklahoma, he played 12 games, 213 rushing attempts, 1,366 yards, 11 touchdowns, 33 receptions, 229 yards, and no additional touchdowns.
So with Eric Gray, he was a pretty highly thought of prospect coming out of high school. Ended up going to Tennessee. He was there at the same time. If you guys remember Ty Chandler last year.
Yep.
They were kind of this like two-headed monster at Tennessee, but Tennessee was just hot garbage. And they basically both transferred the same year and just like and because originally I thought only one of them was going to transfer, which was great news for the other one because they would get the backfield on themselves. They both clearly just wanted fresh opportunity. And I really thought Oklahoma was going to be a great situation for Eric Gray. We were going to see what happened with, there was a guy that transferred that. I can't think of it off the top of my head, but either way, I thought it was going to be a great landing spot and we're going to see great things. His first year at Oklahoma was a great disappointment. Did not play well at all. The numbers were pretty putrid. Came back this year, put together a much better season, much more closely to what we saw at Tennessee. That being said, I have a 68.7 grade for Eric Gray. So not a terrible grade, but not a great grade either. He went to the Senior Bowl this year, did some nice things, but there's not a single area in here where I look at him and I'm like, this is specifically how he wins consistently. I think he does have some decent power. I think he does have some decent contact balance, but he's not a guy with a ton of juice. He's not a guy that's like an incredible receiving back or a guy that's like, oh, his vision is just special. He just sees the hole and just has a great feel or does amazing things at the second level. It's just there's a lot of fineness, a lot of meh.
I have a lot of pretty goods in my descriptions.
But nothing great. And so he reminds me of a guy that is probably going to be in the NFL for a long time, but never necessarily fantasy relevant.
I came away watching Eric Gray not very impressed.
Okay.
This is let's start with the biggest dynasty negative here. His age. This is for one, this guy's got a lot of tread on his tires. He'll be 24 years old when the season is going on, so he's older. I'm just going to go right into the negatives. I mean, his yards per carry is not good at all. And what's really disappointing about that, too, is like he saw a lot of light boxes. Like a lot of light boxes.
Yards per carry, 6.4.
I know, but for how light the boxes were, like I just expected for somebody of his caliber. Like, again, so the way I saw it, I was like, oh, Oklahoma's offense, like
Big 12 defenses against him.
Big 12, yeah.
The Big 12 defense basically just the reason I felt like he averaged 6.4 yards per carry is because they didn't respect the run whatsoever in Oklahoma. That's what I came in with. That's a better way to put it.
Okay. That's fine. Yep.
Garrett said not very explosive at all, not a lot of power, no long speed. I thought he was solid in the passing game. That was like my favorite attribute of him. It's like, oh, he's pretty solid in the passing game. I like his hips. Like he made some pretty good cuts there. But
I thought laterally, his lateral movement was probably his best attribute.
That literally my two things. I like his passing game and his lateral agility.
Yeah.
But that's literally it. There's nothing there on the tape that I saw was like, okay, this is a dynasty asset. Like this is somebody that's going to really like. I'm okay with like Garrett's take here. Like this is somebody who can play in the NFL level, be there for a while, but like he's never like. I don't see him turning in anything that's going to be an asset for my dynasty team. He's probably the guy I want the draft if he's the backup to my running back.
That makes sense. There's a guy. He has enough speed, to be an NFL back. He's got enough burst to do some things. I think plays. He wants to be physical. He just doesn't have maybe the meat or. I mean, he's 207. He's not like light.
But it's a shell. So
he's not afraid of contact. How about that? He's not afraid of contact, but he's not like
he's not a bruiser.
Powerful. He's not a big bruiser.
But let me back up too. Like this is so. I want to reiterate that, like when we talk about these players, we're always talking from also a dynasty fantasy football perspective, right? We're not NFL draft. We're here to talk NFL draft. We're here to talk about dynasty fantasy football. Like, what are the best players for your team? So, like, if you're new to the show, that when we're breaking down these players and stuff, that's the angle we're coming from, right? Like, that's what we want. That's the only reason we're talking about these players. So for me, when I look at Eric Gray, the shelf life is so short. Like, he's not that big of a guy. Like, he's only 5'9.5". He's not that big of a guy.
Pretty common in this draft, though.
It is.
It is.
He's 24 years old, so he's a one contract guy. Like you said for a while, like he's a one contract guy. Yep. That's it. Like he's gonna get at best he gets his 4 years and he's 28 and he's out of the league. So like there's no chance for him like for longevity here. So for me, he's only really useful to the team that he's like a backup running back on. Like when you're like in a 4th or 5th round and you're like, okay, like he went to the Cowboys. That's a bad example because of Tony Pollard, but like he went to the Colts and he's going to back up Jonathan Taylor. I got Jonathan Taylor. Like Eric Gray's going to be a good, like he does a lot of things like, like he's solid.
If Taylor missed 2 games, I could put him in my starting lineup and
get double-digit points.
Get some points.
He can do that for you. But from a dynasty perspective, there's no long-term value here. There's nothing exciting about him whatsoever. Like he's not an exciting prospect. So
he's probably older than Jonathan Taylor.
He probably is older than Jonathan. I think he is.
To be honest.
No, he really is. Yeah. So that's why, like, when I say like he's not very exciting to me whatsoever, because there's no dynasty. So when I say that about him, like, I don't think he's the worst running back in the world, but he to me, from a dynasty perspective, like he doesn't bring anything to the table for me that I'm excited about. I would rather just go gamble elsewhere for the upside.
On an upside player.
Because even if he does hit, you're not going to trade him for much because he has such a short shelf life, and you won't even be able to use him if he comes in very long. So there's not a whole lot of value for me.
I'm with you there, man. I feel very similar, Eric Gray. Okay. Unfortunately, he's not 21 because I feel like if he was 21 coming into the league with some of the things that he's got going on, maybe he could develop.
Yes.
But as a 23, almost 24-year-old, you're physically developed. You know what I mean? Like you're not going to get much faster. You're not going to get much bigger. Exactly. That's kind of your body. That's
why I want to say it like that, because I don't want to say it like he's not. I don't want to make it sound like, oh, Eric Gray's the worst running. Like he's not.
It's there's definitely some worse running backs we've covered.
Yeah. So from a dynasty aspect, though, like, oh my God, I don't want anything to do with this guy.
Cover.
Oh, we're getting really close. We're getting really close to some bad ones here. But I just want to make sure, like when I talk about him, like I don't think he's, when you said like his yards per carry, like they're okay for the system he played in. I thought he should have done better for, like, again, for how old he is. Like he should have done better.
I agree. Yeah.
So that's
absolutely.
It for me.
Well, before we get into those other guys that we're about to talk about, let me talk about FFPC.
I love FFPC.
Launched in 2010, FFPC is the home to the largest high-stakes dynasty leagues in the community. But best of all, they don't fold.
Nope.
They don't fold. You're getting excited. You're hearing us talk about these guys, and I was like, well, I want Tank Bigsby. Well, and then you go to draft them, and they're like, oh, sorry, our league folded. Never mind. And how disappointing is that? You don't have to worry about that at FFPC. You want to play in leagues that 2K is for the startup? Go right ahead.
Baller.
You're like, I like to play it a little more conservative, a little closer to the vest. $77 leagues, more my speed. And you know what? We'll even beat that, because with the promo curd. I did that last time too.
Promo code Wisconsin for the cheese curds.
The promo code NERDS. I think it's the code and NERDS.
Yep. Together
is what's getting me. Promo code NERDS. You get $25 off your entry if you're a new member. So that takes that $77 down to $52. So head on over there, myffpc.com. Look for the Dynasty page. View available orphans, and then just go on there. Have a good time. Promo code Nerds.
I love going on myffpc.com to look at the orphans available. And they're so tempting to get on there. And they change daily too. So I highly encourage people to get on there and check out those orphans. They'll be opening new leagues new leagues as well. But if you're looking for the safest protected platform to play on, it's myffpc.com. I love it.
All right, let's get back into it, guys.
Let's do it.
This first guy in the second half of our show here is Chris Rodriguez, running back, Kentucky, 6 foot, 217 pounds, 8 5/8 inch hands. No running, no anything. He had 19 bench press reps at the combine. Last year in 8 games, he had 175 attempts, 904 yards, 6 touchdowns, 5 receptions, 41 yards, no touchdowns. He missed the first 4 games of the season due to an off-the-field issue and a suspension. It was a driving while intoxicated and reckless driving or something like that, I believe.
Yeah, no
careless,
worries. He's
careless,
legal,
not reckless.
He's legally allowed to drink because he's also really old.
22, he'll be 23.
He'll be 24.
Do I have that wrong?
I think you do.
Did
I
miss
don't
it
know
by
he's
a
going to
year?
be 24.
I'll have to look. I don't know. Either way, he's not young.
Yeah.
Okay. Yep. It's either 23, going to be 20, or 22, going to be 23, or he's 23, going to be 24. Either way, old.
Not ideal.
Yeah, for me, okay.
I'll verify that.
I have nothing nice to say here, so I apologize in advance to Chris Rodriguez's family. Out of running back out of Kentucky, he's a 1-speed runner, and when I say that, that's not like it's a compliment. Like if you have one of those Ryan lawnmowers, they have like the hair and then the turtle, so he'd be on the turtle gear of the Ryan lawnmower. And when a Ryan lawnmower, it's easy to catch up to and like jump on its back, and that's fine. And because I mean he has that, like his size and power.
Yep.
Thumbs up.
Yep.
Thumbs up. But this guy does not move. This is a guy.
This is a
not
guy.
move laterally or change direction very well at all. He's got zero burst. I mean, zero burst. His vision's terrible. He runs upright. I watched, like when I first started watching his tape, I literally was like, am I watching like a real college running back here? Like, is this real life? Like, is this, like, what is he doing? Like, what is
real life?
Like, where's his? He has no. Like, does he know where he's running? Where's his? Like, I felt like he was just. I literally felt like
he's super slow. He breaks and tackles.
Yeah, because he's 6 foot, 217 pounds. I feel like you're watching somebody like you're in a prison game and you're like, hey, you're the running back. You're gonna be hard to tackle. And he's like, yeah, that's me. And they give him the football and he's like, all right, let's go. And they give it to him and it works. I mean, Kentucky's not a small school too, which is kind of weird. Like I felt like it could do better.
Yeah.
But dude, he is like lumbering.
He's lumbering.
But like not the tree, like the round tree that you roll down the hill, like you cut it into a square first.
Clunk, clunk, clunk.
Cut the tree into a square first.
Yeah. And then roll it down a hill. That seems slow.
Tell everybody why they should draft Chris Rodriguez because he's not even on my board.
No, I don't have reasons. I thought he was obviously very slow. I thought his burst was better, like his initial burst was better than his speed. So he's more bursty than fast.
Even though he had an initial burst.
I do have issues with some of the vision. I felt like there was times that he could have zigged, but he zagged.
I was like, is Ray Charles his father?
He's definitely not going to be used in the passing game. I struggled. Like my final notes on him, I had a hard time figuring out how he's going to score fantasy points. Or
I have a hard time seeing if he's playing the
Goal
NFL.
line. Goal line. That would be
fantasy points. You got to play in the NFL to score fantasy points.
That's a good point.
He's going to be calling up Dwayne The Rock Johnson like, hey, you got a job for me? XFL. Like, dude, no, you don't fit here either, buddy.
I did put that he has good patience.
Is he? Was it though? Was it though?
It's just because it took him a long time to get to the line.
So Ryan Lomer on turtle mode.
That was what I struggled with. I honestly said, I was like, I can't tell if he's got issues with his vision. He's not a creative runner. He's just this slow that he can't get like that. These are part of my notes. Like
I knew within 30 seconds of watching his tape that I was in for a hot mess of time. Mm-hmm. You know, and sometimes when you do this for the people to study these prospects, you have to suffer.
You do.
This is one of the moments.
Yeah. When things break down ahead of him, he generally can't get out of that.
And I would say, like, I don't like to talk down to some of these kids. But
what's the dude saying in Space Jam? He's like, I might not be able to jump, but I'm slow. Like it kind of feels like that.
It does kind of feel like that. So listen, he's going to be hard to draft. I'm not sure he's going to get NFL drafted.
He has my third lowest score. in the class.
I'm not alone. All right.
So 58.45.
We said it might get ugly here in the second half of the show, and it might get ugly in the second half of the show.
Not about this next player we talk about.
No, I
like this guy.
There's going to be ups and downs. How about that?
Let's get up.
All right.
I like this guy a lot.
Get on up.
Go ahead. Go ahead. All right. Our next prospect is DeWayne McBride. UAB running back, 5'10", 209, 9.5-inch hands. He's only 21 years old. So what a refreshing breath of
He'll be 22.
He'll be 22 in July.
Fine, though.
Yes.
Ain't no problem.
There's no combine numbers. He had a tweaked hamstring. The pro day also held him out of the stuff with the same hamstring. Last year in 12 games, he had 233 rushing attempts, 1,713 yards, 19 touchdowns. Only 2 receptions for 10 yards and no touchdowns there in the passing game.
So McBride was one of the last guys that I had watched of the main names.
Yep.
And initially, I just peek behind the curtain. I make these lists, and I make these lists that we're going to do on the show back in January, early January, just kind of what I know about the players, how their stock is trending roughly. And this was a guy that I didn't know a ton about, and I knew a couple people that were like, oh yeah, he's good. But there's also a couple people that say like, oh yeah, Chris Rodriguez is good. Like, so you never really know like how good is this guy.
Right.
I walked away really, really impressed with McBride. Now, I'll say that in the sense of he is a very specific role. This is not a 3-down back, because his scores for me are fascinating, because there's a lot of really high scores and there's a lot of really low scores. Mm-hmm. Whereas normally like they normalize a little bit. His are like, I mean, if it was a graph, it would be like this, the whole way down. So
YouTube.
I think he struggles with his vision a little bit. I don't think he has great vision, but he has the highest contact balance in the class. Like, that's above Bijan. That's above, like, he has the best contact balance in the class. Really? Extremely physical runner. Mm-hmm. Will run through your face and think nothing of it.
To the face.
Really nice power.
Yeah.
Really nice power.
Love his contact balance.
And he doesn't lose a lot of speed when he does it too. Like, he's very efficient when he runs the football, but slightly subpar average. Not terrible, but it is subpar.
What is subpar?
His vision.
Vision. Okay.
Yep. Is subpar.
I thought it was good.
There were a lot of holes that I saw he missed. He actually has better vision at the second level than he does at the first level. From my notes.
Okay.
Fair. That's fair.
I think once he gets that open field, he has a much better concept of what's going on. I think sometimes he misses holes, but I think he's such a physical runner that sometimes I just don't think he cares. That he'll just run through people.
I think he does a good job of getting small sometimes in the hole too,
He can.
is for a guy that's nearly 210 pounds. I think he does a good job navigating that kind of stuff.
Yep.
I can't really put my finger. I think he's definitely got really good contact balance. He's always falling forward.
Always.
And sometimes he's not falling at all. He's taking hits and he
just keeps going.
He just keeps going. So that I can totally see why you have him rated the highest in the class for that kind of attribute. I think he's fast enough, right? Like, he does not have he doesn't have
him
top gear.
Slightly below average speed. Yep.
Yeah. And I think he's got pretty good burst. You know what I mean? So that I think talks a little bit to what you were saying with when you said like he doesn't really slow down, you know, cutting and all that kind of stuff, or taking hits. Like he's able to keep his feet and kind of keep his momentum and speed. So all that kind of, I think, meshes together and kind of paints a picture of a guy that he can beat you in multiple ways, right? Like, he can beat you with power if he makes you like a slight juke, because he's not laterally really explosive. You know what I mean?
Nope.
So he'll put a
way.
slight move on you and combine that with the fact that he can power through some stuff. And if you do just get a piece of him, it's not going to take him down. He's going to be able to keep on moving and stuff like that. So it's starting to paint a picture of a guy that can be effective in the NFL. And so I really like a lot of his attributes. You know, he's never going to be a home run guy, and he's never going to catch passes. He didn't really do that.
There's two big holes. I was hoping, Rich, or you would cover them. There's two big, massive holes in this game.
So, watching DeWayne McBride's tape, I was like, I found him. I found my gem. I found my hidden gem of this draft class. The guy will have in every one of my drafts. I love him. I really enjoyed his tape. Like as I'm watching him, like early in the process, I'm like, I found a guy who's going to join that third tier. It's going to be a sticky guy. Like when I put this on Twitter, people are going to be like, ooh. People are going to tweet at me.
Oh, man.
People are going to tweet at me, emoji eyes, looking to the left, you know?
Looking to the left.
Because I really, like you mentioned, a lot of good stuff. Like I like some of his stuff that you guys didn't like as much. Like I thought his vision was okay. I thought he had good stop ability. For his size, I thought his hips were pretty loose. I thought his lateral movement was okay there. I really like his production, right? Like this is somebody who ran for at least 120 yards in all of his games, but one. So, and that what really impressive about that is he had 7.3 yards per carry average. He was the focal point of UAB's offense. He saw the most 8 men in the box out of all the running backs in this class because they were focused on him because he was UAB's offense. When they had 8 men in the box, he still averaged 5.9 yards per carry. Still. And he was a focal point of the offense. So I really like that. The power, the contact balance.
The one question I have, the one game where he did his worst, LSU, right? That was the game where it was 13 rushes, 34 yards.
He still had a couple like watching that game because I did watch that one.
Mm-hmm.
He still had a couple plays where I was like, dang, that was a nice run.
Yeah, for sure.
There were some bad ones and he got stuffed at the line a lot,
Yes.
but there were some still that were
that
impressive.
and his pass pro. I mentioned the lack of catching passes, but his pass pro was suspect. I saw him get tossed on his butt once.
I'm surprised no one the other big hole there's one other big hole.
I haven't named any big holes.
Okay.
So
there's another big one that somebody better mention.
The minor hole is his top end speed and burst. Yep. Right. That's a minor hole because he did enough of it where he still, like you said, he'd stop, he'd get hit, he'd go under defender, and then run and still do a really good job.
He'd gain 20 yards. He'd eventually get
caught. Yeah.
You know what I mean? That's in the college game too.
So the biggest downfall here, again, from fantasy football aspect, and this is a massive one, definitely in today's game, is 2 massive holes. One, he doesn't offer anything in the passing game. He has 5 career catches. 5. Now, for most people, you count that on one hand.
Yes.
Most people.
Correct. Garrett.
Yes.
Sorry.
Another one. His ball security.
Yes, that was the other one.
Yes, I forgot about the amount of
He had
fumbles.
5
so
fumbles out of 233 carries. Yeah. So it's like 12% or something along those lines. It's not.
It's an alarming.
It's less than that.
It's not that much.
It's not that much. But that was concerning. So again, so talking about this from a fantasy football perspective, if he offers nothing in the passing game, you're talking about a guy that's going to get you, if he doesn't score a touchdown, 6 to 8 points per game. That's what he is. Mm-hmm. He's for sure going to find himself on an NFL roster. Like he just looks too good not to find himself on an NFL roster. If somehow they can work with him to turn him into a pass catcher running back, there is a path here for DeWayne McBride to be a starting running back in the NFL. There is. Like he could be a starting running back in the NFL. He's coming from UAB. If somebody can work with him, mold him, there's a path there. I really enjoyed watching his tape. I have him in my 5th tier. He's a player that I like. When I'm watching, after I got through all these other running backs, I felt way more comfortable with DeWayne McBride than I did in the end. And just like Garrett, like he's one of the last running backs I watched too. So like I had a good grasp of what I'm getting into already compared to the rest of the guys. I'm like, okay, this is a guy that excites me. When you watch his tape, like he's excited, right? Like he has it. Like he's a running back. Like he's a true running back. He's just he's limited in the spots that when from a fantasy aspect, you don't want to be limited. No catches, and he has fumbling problems. The fumbling problem can be a huge problem because if you fumble at NFL level, you're not going to get opportunity to be on the field. No. So he's got to clean that up. And now it can be done. You know, we've seen it done. I mean, there's running backs like that, like Tiki Barber, huge fumbling problems. Fixed it, went on to a Hall of Fame career, essentially. So
Peterson had trouble fumbling the football a lot, too.
He did early. So DeWayne McBride, he's somebody I came away with very pleasantly surprised. I like the prospect.
Something I want to mention real quick. I'm going to use this both for this guy and another guy. But there was an awesome chart that Arjun Menon put out, and Dan Toomey tagged me in it, talking about a different player. But I found McBride's stats on here too, which were crazy impressive. So in this draft class, on runs that were, and this is according to PFF, runs that were blocked perfectly, he had the most yards per carry in the class. on plays that were not blocked perfectly, he had the second most yards in the class. So he is making it happen basically either way. Like he is making it happen. So that's what you love to see out of a first and second down running back. Are those guys as appealing for fantasy football as guys that can also catch passes? No. But I do think that there's a role for him, and he could be a touchdown monster at the next level.
I could definitely see that. I think his ability to get small at the line of scrimmage but still maintain power, I think it would suit him well down towards the goal line. And, I mean, he did it in college, 19 touchdowns this past season and 13 the year before. So he's shown that he can be that kind of guy. Where do you guys see him as far as NFL draft pedigree?
I'm really because his tape is so. I like his tape so much. I am so intrigued. If an NFL team falls in love with him, like kind of like I did. You know what I mean? Because if I was a scout for an NFL team, I would bring this to my GM like, this is a player we should add to the roster because there's upside there. Like if I was a Browns coach, I'm like, I think we have Nick Chubb, for example, like Browns. Like we have Nick Chubb. He doesn't catch a lot of footballs. He's 27 years old. This is the last year of his guaranteed money. We have Stump Mitchell. He's a good running back coach. I think if this is a guy we could bring in, we could probably get him in like the 5th round. We bring him in. We set him behind Nick Chubb. 2 years. This guy could be our starter running back, and we use Jerome Ford as our patch guy running back. That's the kind of like fit I could see him fall into.
And that's where I have him. I'm like, I think because he is limited in a few areas, he might be one of these guys that ends up in this 5th to 7th round range. And the fact that there's so many guys, there's just so many bodies this year. A guy like this could fall through the cracks a little bit, playing from a smaller school and being somewhat limited in the passing game. So I guess I wouldn't be shocked if he lands in that kind of range. And for me, I'm okay with that because we've seen guys emerge from that range, even undrafted free agents that probably had, I think, less skills than him. You know what I mean? So,
absolutely. He ended up with a 72.25 for me. Wow. So he got a good score. He hit above that 72 threshold, which we've kind of seen be that line of if you're under a 72, it's pretty spotty. If you're under a 68, it's like almost no chance of hitting. So he's definitely in that range of guys that I could see hitting at the next level. And something else that, you talked about, Lance Zierlein's kind of like your guy. Daniel Jeremiah is my guy. Like, I really trust a lot of things he says. He has him as his RB5. Now, that's more steep than I'm willing to put, but that was good to see that he is a guy that he believes in.
Yeah, that's great. I mean, and I put a 5th to 7th round expectation kind of in my own head. If it's something 3rd to 4th round, I mean, then
it changes things a lot.
Then it changes things a lot because now he's got pedigree, draft pedigree, NFL draft pedigree behind that, and he might start rising up my board a little bit as well.
Yeah, he's my sneaky guy. He's like when I got done watching this tape, I'm like, this is a guy I'm gonna snatch up in the 3rd round of every draft I'm in, whether it be like 3-3 or 3-12. Like this is a guy I want to get in my roster. And I have it down here written, like, I'm really intrigued to where he goes in the NFL draft.
It is going to be interesting.
And because even if he, like I said, if he goes in the 5th, 6th round, like, that doesn't bother me for his playing style. If he goes higher, obviously, he then gets bumped in my rankings as well. So, like, I will adjust from that standpoint where he goes from being like, a sneaky guy and getting a 3rd round I feel really good about, like right after those tight ends all go, that tight end run, I can get DeWayne McBride, to, okay, I got to take DeWayne McBride before the tight ends and then see what tight end falls.
Make sure you get him.
So he's one of those players when I said the NFL draft will sharpen my sword to see how I cut this. He's the guy that I could either get as a sneaky guy, but I'm going to get, or he could be the guy that gets pushed up my rankings.
The ninja over here talking about sharpening.
Look at back in. When you see my wife when you go upstairs, just go up to PTSD.
She'll be ready for it this time.
She will be.
It's a block.
She's been training.
Too quick. So I'm glad. Well, I'm glad we're all
on board.
There.
Yeah, usually when there's a sneaky guy and all of us like him, it turns out to be like Khalil Herbert. So that's good, right?
That's good news.
Yep.
Yeah, that's actually not bad.
So our next prospect,
last guy
of the show,
unless you're a nerd member, UnderDog, $10 full year. Poo.
Anyway,
did you say poo poo
in my pants?
Nasty. All right, our last. You guys are so excited about this last guy that you get
so excited.
He's to die for.
Oh gosh! All right, so Travvis Dye is the running back from Southern Cal. He's 5'10", 201. He didn't run anything.
He's old.
He was, yes, he's 23. He's going to be 24 at the end of August.
Nice mustache, old guy.
He does have a mustache. Did you see him or something?
Fu Manchu.
Yeah, okay. All right, so this past season, well, first of all, he played 4 years at Oregon. He transferred to USC this past season. So
That's
he's
5 years for everybody that's listening.
for everyone that can add, that's 5.
Last
Last year in 10 games, he had 145 attempts, 884 yards, and 9 touchdowns. He also had 21 receptions for 202 yards. No additional touchdowns there.
He was really productive at Oregon, too, which is kind of weird. They went to USC, like, oh, I'm going to keep playing. He knew the writing was on the wall, though. He's like, I'm going to try and get some of this NIL money is what I'm going to try and do.
There you go.
Money than
Recruit me.
Yeah, career. I mean, this is somebody, if you want to know what Travvis Dye is good at, he's good at catching the football. He's good at, after he gets the football, run after the catch. Like, he's solid there. Good vision.
I think he knows how to get in the way in pass pro.
He had decent pass pro. I was impressed with his pass pro, but my literal text to Jared was, Travvis Dye, he's good at catching the ball and protecting the quarterback. Things he's bad at. Everything else.
He for an athlete, he doesn't seem very athletic.
I think he injured his ankle. That's why he only had 10 games this past season. He didn't run at his pro day or anything like that. Or no, he ran, it was wet or something like that. He had a really crappy time.
He's also 5'10", 201. I would have never guessed that watching his tape. I thought he was smaller than that.
You thought he was smaller?
Yeah, he looked a little smaller. Maybe he just plays smaller.
He doesn't play with much physicality.
Poorly.
He can break the occasional arm tackle. He's never going to break any real contact.
He's the poster child for he will get exactly what's blocked and no more.
Yes, I agree. He only profiles as a pass catching guy, but he doesn't do anything flashy enough. You know what I mean?
No,
to actually
he just
get that
catches
job. Yeah, he catches the ball. He's not fast.
Which is better than some people.
There's actually fantasy points there. So
there is.
Even though Garrett's going to put on a poster, you don't have to put him on a milk carton.
That's true.
If you catch the football, there's a path.
I guess.
But like he doesn't. There's no
fifth round of your rookie draft.
There's no explosive trait there to warrant him being a pass catching back. Like, you know what I mean?
Right.
Like, he catches
that he can catch.
That he can catch. That's it. I mean, but anyone can get on a drugs machine and improve catching.
Right.
Unfortunately, the explosion just kind of isn't there.
He can catch himself on somebody else's roster.
I feel bad. I hate trashing guys, but it really is. It's just one of those situations where I just don't think he has what it takes to be a legitimate NFL player. Like, if he gets drafted, it's going to be round 7, and
good for him.
And good for him.
Do you know what I mean?
Get some money for being on an NFL roster for a few days.
Yeah, I got that.
Burn only a few days.
All right, a few months.
He's not. I mean, he's not the worst thing I've ever seen, but like again, I just don't see a really good path for dynasty production there. But
I agree. We ended this one on a bit of a fizzle.
At least we had McBride at the second half.
But
sometimes we have nobody in the second half.
No doubt. But Dye is an important guy. We have to go. We say it all the time. We have to cover the good and the bad, so you know which guys to kind of avoid.
I would draft Chris Dye over Chris Rodriguez.
I think that's fair. I technically have Dye as a point worse.
Travvis Dye, not Chris Dye.
But I think I would take Dye just because he can physically catch.
Yeah.
But
I don't know what kind of lawnmower he rides, but
I might go with Rodriguez and hope that he
goal line.
Gets a little
converts to fullback and is in the NFL that way.
Gets a little bit of goal line work.
We can round the edges on that square tree.
Just get some sandpaper. It's fine.
How about we wrap up this running back class in the Nerd Herd show?
Ooh, that sounds like a plan.
Let's jump in.
So